The mind reader stopped at the threshold. One forelimb hung in the air above the silver strip marking the entrance to Crisis Hall 7. Its head lowered, the flexible sensory veins along its neck folded flat, then it backed away. Kieran Moss glanced from the creature to the cluster of instructors waiting behind it. "Is that normal?" Nobody answered. That was usually a bad sign. The skeleth was roughly the size of an Earth Mountain lion if somebody had replaced fur with overlapping black plates and given the animal 6 narrow eyes. 4 jointed limbs carried its weight close to the floor. A second pair of smaller grasping limbs rested beneath its chest. Around its skull, dozens of translucent filaments shifted with the air. Kieran had been told not to stare at those. They were not antennae. They were part of the organ with which the animal sampled nearby thought. The skeleth took another step backward. Its handler, a broad alien named Severin, tightened his grip on the guidance sash without pulling. Latch. The creature's 6 eyes stayed fixed on the doorway. 27 rescue candidates waited inside Crisis Hall 7. So did Kieran. He stood 3 meters beyond the entrance beside a diagnostic console, holding the slate that identified him as the day's external practical evaluator. The moment he took 1 step toward the door, Latch's chest expanded. A low clicking sound came from somewhere behind its jaw. Severin went very still. Kieran stopped. "That one's normal?" he asked. "No. Good. Consistency." Provost Amvek, Director of Practical Certification at Astor Reach Emergency Academy, stared at him as if human humor had just become a separate administrative problem. "Evaluator Moss," Amvek said, "please remain exactly where you are. Wasn't planning to wrestle it. That was not a concern until you said it." Kieran looked through the open doorway. Inside, candidates from 9 species occupied stations arranged around a mock disaster district. Collapsible walls, pressure doors, rescue mannequins, environmental projectors, smoke emitters, and programmable structural obstacles formed an entire miniature urban emergency zone inside the rotating cylindrical hall. Today was supposed to be simple. Not easy. Simple. The candidates would receive a simulated transit terminal accident. They would assess casualties, establish safe routes, manage panicked civilians, and complete evacuation under changing conditions. Astor Reach took cheating seriously, because certification here was not academic decoration. Graduates became rescue coordinators, hazard officers, and emergency supervisors. A candidate who memorized restricted scenario data could appear competent without actually being competent. So Astor Reach used skeleths. The species had evolved alongside strongly telepathic herd animals. They could detect borrowed memory patterns, concealed mental prompting, and the distinctive cognitive repetition of somebody searching for memorized answers supplied from outside. Kieran had thought that sounded excessive. Then he'd remembered how many Earth institutions had made people complete online safety courses by clicking through slides while watching television. Every civilization had its methods. Latch refused to enter. Provost Amvek stepped towards Severin. "Try the secondary approach." The handler slowly guided the animal toward the wider equipment gate. Latch followed for 4 steps. Then Kieran shifted his weight. The animal's head snapped around. It retreated so abruptly that its rear claws scraped across the floor. Every filament around its skull drew tight against its neck. Severin whispered something in his own language. Kieran understood only the tone. That was not irritation. That was concern. Provost Amvek looked at him. Kieran sighed. "Me." Nobody contradicted him. He set the evaluator slate on the console. "Let's test it." "Test what?" "The obvious thing." Kieran walked deeper into the hall. Latch watched. He crossed behind one of the mock transit barriers and stopped where the creature could no longer see him directly. Severin eased the sash forward. Latch approached the threshold. 1 step, 2, 3. Its sensory veins lifted. Kieran came back around the barrier. Latch froze. It reversed so fast it nearly sat on one of its smaller arms. Several candidates inside the hall had stopped pretending not to watch. One whispered something. Another craned a long neck over a partition. Kieran pointed at himself. "That seems fairly conclusive." Provost Amvek's throat plates darkened. "What are you doing?" "Reducing variables. This is not one of your Earth drills." "No. On Earth we'd have forms." That got a noise from one of the candidates that might have been a laugh. The provost ignored it. "Remain still." Kieran obeyed. Severin crouched beside Latch. The skeleth was breathing quickly now. Its claws flexed against the floor in irregular little movements. Kieran's amusement disappeared. "Don't bring it closer." Severin looked up. "I was about to determine whether the response could be overcome. It's an animal telling you no. It is a trained institutional detection organism. Still sounds like no. The hall went quiet enough that Kieran could hear the soft hum of the rotating cylinder beneath the... I did not say I intended to. Your provost was about to. Amvek stiffened. Deck. Provost Amvek studied him. You understand that without the skeleton inspection, this examination cannot proceed under current certification rules. Kieran looked at the waiting candidates. Some had trained for years. A few had traveled between systems for this test. He looked back at Latch. The creature had pressed itself against Savran's legs. Then, delay the exam, 27 heads turned toward him. Amvek stared. You would suspend certification because an animal refuses to stand near you. I'm not the one panicking. You are the anomaly, apparently, and you are willing to inconvenience 27 candidates. Kieran crouched slowly. He made sure not to move toward Latch. I've worked emergency sites where somebody said, it's probably fine, because fixing the problem would delay everybody. He nodded toward the skeleton. Those are usually the words right before I get busy. Savran's expression changed, not dramatically, just enough. Provost Amvek looked from the human to the creature. Evaluator Moss, leave the hall. Kieran stood. Sure. He picked up his slate and walked through the side service exit rather than toward Latch. The door shut behind him. Through the observation glass, he watched Severin wait. The skeleton's breathing slowed. Its veins rose. After half a minute, it approached the threshold, then crossed. The candidates began murmuring. Amvek looked through the glass at Kieran. Kieran lifted one hand. Congratulations, he said through the intercom. You've isolated the problem? The provost did not smile. They put Kieran in a consultation room. That word meant something different on Earth. At Aster Reach, consultation rooms had transparent walls. 3 monitoring units and a chair designed by somebody whose species apparently had no lower spine. Kieran stood instead. Provost Amvek entered with Severin and a medical evaluator. Before we begin, Kieran said, is Latch okay? The medical evaluator blinked. Severin answered, he is recovering? Good. Amvek placed Kieran's slate on the table. Now we determine why our most reliable cognitive integrity organism reacts to you as though you constitute an immediate threat. Could be my personality. No response. All right, tough room. The medical evaluator activated a scanner. Kieran held his arms out. Have you undergone psychic conditioning? No. Intense suppression training? No. Hostile cognition masking? I don't even know what that is. You are an emergency instructor. Correct? You have military experience? No. Law enforcement. The machine passed light over his clothing, skin and skull. No active transmitters, the evaluator said. Fantastic. No neural augmentation. Also fantastic. No glandular compounds associated with telepathic masking. Didn't know those existed. Amvek leaned forward. Experience? No. Intelligence service? No. What precisely did you do on Earth? Kieran considered the question. Mostly taught people how not to make emergencies worse. Severin made a soft sound. The human looked at him. What? That is an unusually broad profession. Emergencies are unusually broad. Amvek tapped the slate. You have certifications in fire response, decompression management, crowd evacuation, infrastructure incident command, wilderness rescue, mass casualty coordination, and kitchen burns. The provost stopped. Kieran, sorry. It was the first time Amvek had used his given name that bothered him more than the suspicion. What were you thinking about when Latch approached the hall? Kieran shrugged. The test, specifically. Lots of things. List them. He looked at the transparent wall. How long do you have? Amvek's eyes narrowed. Start? Kieran tried to remember. The west pressure shutter was slow. The medical evaluator looked down. The shutter passed inspection. Didn't say it was broken, said it was slow. He pointed through the wall toward the distant hall. Candidate stations were too close to the center lane. If it catches the floor grid during evacuation, the candidate carrying it might twist instead of dropping properly. Amvek said, what else? The observation glass. What about it? Nothing. Then why think about it? Because if the hall lost rotation control, if you simulate smoke, half of them will bunch left because the right-hand indicators are mounted high for 3 of the species taking the exam. Severin stared. Kieran continued. One of your rescue mannequins has a magnetic shoulder joint. I wanted to know which panels were designed to take lateral impact. Silence. Kieran frowned. What? Severin's skin had changed color. Not much, but enough. The medical evaluator whispered, "Rotation failure?" Kieran looked between them. "It was an example." Amvek spoke carefully. "When you entered the hall, did you believe rotation failure was likely?" "No." "Did you imagine it?" "Sure." "Why?" "Because it would be inconvenient." Nobody spoke. Kieran rubbed the back of his neck. "Okay. I'm getting the impression we're defining imagine differently." Severin stared through the glass at the hall. "What else?" Kieran exhaled. Fire in the ceiling duct. Pressure door jam. Candidate panic. Instructor collapse. Power loss. Comms interference. Someone using the wrong extinguisher. Simulated civilian deciding not to cooperate. 2 candidates choosing opposite command structures. Emergency lighting failure. A real injury being mistaken for part of the scenario. The medical evaluator lowered the scanner. All of those? And more. At the same time? Not exactly. Then how? Kieran smiled faintly. In branches, Severin stood very still. Amvek asked, "Explain." Kieran pointed at the table. "Suppose this room loses power. The lights stayed on. First question, why? Local breaker? Hall failure? Station failure? If local, door may still work. If not, manual release. If atmosphere control goes too, different problem. If lighting fails but ventilation keeps running, we wait. If ventilation stops, we move. If the door jams, we decide whether staying is safer than forcing it." The 3 aliens watched him. Kieran stopped. "What?" Severin said softly. "You have just imagined multiple versions of us being trapped in this room." "No, you described them. I imagined ways not to be trapped." The handler looked toward Crisis Hall 7. And for the first time, Kieran saw real understanding begin to compete with fear. They did not accuse him of cheating. That was an improvement. They accused him of being cognitively alarming. Kieran decided there were worse official descriptions. The problem was that Aster Reach specialists could not agree on what Latch had sensed. The Skelleth was not a language reader. It did not hear internal sentences or inspect memory like a recording. It perceived intention, attention, emotional weighting, and vivid perspective imagery as overlapping patterns. For the species that had trained Skelleths for generations, those things usually aligned. If somebody vividly imagined striking another person, there was generally some relationship between the image and actual intent. If somebody pictured an exit repeatedly, they were probably thinking about using it. If somebody mentally rehearsed a forbidden answer during an examination, they probably knew that answer already. Kieran apparently violated the assumptions. He looked at an exit and imagined it blocked. He looked at a pressure door and pictured it failing. He saw a calm room and generated smoke, darkness, falling panels, confused crowds, and malfunctioning alarms. Then he generated responses. Severin called it cognitive storming. Kieran called it Tuesday. They moved the next discussion to an observation gallery above an empty training chamber. Latch remained on the far side of the glass. The creature was calm until Kieran entered. Then its veins tightened. Severin watched both of them. "Think of nothing dangerous." Kieran laughed. "That's not how that works." "Attempt it." "Fine." He looked at the empty chamber. A row of folded rescue stretchers hung against the wall. Nothing dangerous. He thought about lunch. The station cafeteria had something advertised as human-compatible bread. It wasn't. "You did it again." "I saw a bad latch." "The latch is functional." "Probably." "Then why imagine failure?" "Because if it fails when somebody's on it, the person carrying the head end needs to know which way the load will shift." Provost Amvek, standing behind them, said. He thought about actual bread. Then he noticed one stretcher latch was angled slightly differently from the others. If that latch failed while loaded, latch hissed. Severin slapped both palms against the console. "You cannot simply observe equipment. I am observing it." "No. You are inventing catastrophes involving it." "That's a dramatic way to describe inspection." "It is an exact description." Kieran looked through the glass. Latch's eyes followed him. He felt a little guilty now. The creature wasn't reacting to hostility. It was reacting to a non-stop stream of things going wrong. He could see how that might ruin a morning. "Can it learn context?" he asked. Severin glanced at him. "Meaning. Can it distinguish a thought that's prediction from a thought that's desire?" "Normally, it does not need to." "That's not an answer." Severin's jaw shifted. Skelleths learn individuals. They learn emotional patterns. They recognize deception and familiarity. "What?" You were invited because the Academy wanted an external human evaluation of our emergency response program. Yes. The request came after 3 mixed-species rescue agencies reported that human-trained responders behaved differently during cascading incidents. Kieran? But this, he gestured at Kieran, is excessive. Thank you. It was not praise. Still taking it Provost, Amvek stepped closer. The practical examination has been rescheduled for tomorrow. Kieran nodded. I'll stay outside. Amvek hesitated. Kieran saw it. Leaned against the rail. Differently good or differently bad? Annoyingly good. Ah, your methods remain under evaluation. Fair. Removing you from the hall compromises that evaluation? Kieran glanced at Latch. Dragging him inside compromises more. Severin studied him. Humans assign moral weight to an animal's refusal. Sometimes, even when the animal is trained for necessary work, especially then, that seemed to unsettle the handler almost as much as Kieran's mind. Why? Because trained doesn't mean disposable. Latch's veins rose slightly. Kieran noticed, Severin noticed him noticing. Do not interpret that as agreement. I wasn't. You were. Maybe a little. The door behind them opened. 3 rescue candidates entered. Provost Amvek turned sharply. This gallery is restricted. The tallest candidate lifted both hands. We know. Then why are you here? Because you removed Evaduer Moss. Kieran looked at Amvek. I thought you said I volunteered. You did. Good. He asked why the north exit has no floor indicators. Amvek said, it complies with code. He asked why. Another candidate added, just checking the record. The candidate ignored him. Our class objects. Amvek's throat plates darkened. To what? To losing the human evaluator. Kieran blinked. He had met the class for less than a day. One of the smaller candidates pointed at him. He asked what happens if 2 team leaders give different evacuation orders. That is covered by command protocol. He asked what happens if neither knows the other has issued an order. Kieran folded his arms. Provost Amvek gave him a look. He shrugged. They were good questions. The tall candidate continued. Last week our instructors taught the approved response tree for terminal decompression. Kieran nodded. Good response tree. He asked what we would do if the first safe compartment was already full. Amvek's attention shifted. And we argued for 40 minutes. That does not sound productive. It was. The candidate looked at Kieran. We found 6 assumptions in the standard procedure. Kieran corrected him. 5. 1 was just bad labeling. 6. Fine. Amvek looked increasingly unhappy. What are you asking? Let him observe remotely. Let him question us after each stage. Kieran looked at the candidates. You don't need me to pass. No, the tall one said. We need you to make passing annoying. Kieran smiled. Now that's education. Severin devised the experiment that afternoon. No forcing, no restraint, no drugs. Latch would remain in an adjacent chamber with an open retreat path. Kieran would sit beyond transparent shielding. A trained telepathic interpreter would monitor the Skelet's reaction patterns while Kieran looked at controlled images. They began with neutral objects. A cup, a chair, a closed door. The cup produced almost nothing. The chair produced a mild spike because Kieran noticed its rear leg was narrower than the others and pictured someone leaning back. The door was worse. What happened? Amvek asked. Kieran stared at the image. It opens inward. So bad for crowd pressure. There is no crowd. Yes. Then why is there a crowd in your thoughts? There isn't. Latch clicked sharply. Kieran rubbed his face. Okay. There was. Next image, a corridor. Latch's filaments tightened. What now? Severin asked. Blind corner. Next. An empty shuttle platform. Latch backed up. Kieran winced. That's probably the edge. The edge? No barrier. There is a warning stripe. Paint does not stop momentum. Amvek whispered something that the translator did not render. Next came a classroom. Latch relaxed. Kieran smiled. Then he noticed the ceiling panels. The creature immediately recoiled. Oh, come on. Severin almost laughed. Almost. Then the final image appeared. A rescue scene. Smoke. Collapsed structures, people moving in confusion, emergency lights. Medical teams, for the first time, Latch did not retreat. The creature's veins rose, its 6 eyes fixed on Kieran. He leaned forward, inside his head. The scene unfolded, smoke source, wind direction, secondary collapse. Who was moving? who was not, which responders had tools, which route stayed clear. Where would frightened people naturally gather? What would fail if the obvious exit became unusable? Branches opened, one after another, but each ended in action. Move that team. Close that door. Check the overhead load. Separate walking casualties from those needing transport. Protect the bottleneck. Create another route before the first one fails. Latch stepped closer to the transparent barrier. Severin stopped breathing for a moment. Kieran kept looking at the image. The creature's filaments moved, not flat, not tight. Following the test ended, nobody spoke immediately. Finally, Severin said, "I think I understand." Kieran looked at him. "What?" "When you observe safety, your thoughts create danger." "Yes, when you observe danger, your thoughts create order." Kieran considered that. "That's actually pretty good." Provost Amvek stared at the blank screen. "Our species do not think this way. None of you, not with this density." Severin shook his head. "Perspective imagery is expensive for us. Vivid internal simulations carry emotional weight. We do not generate dozens of unwanted futures merely to discard them." Kieran looked at Latch. The skeleton had settled onto its front limbs. "So he thinks I'm constantly predicting disasters." "Not predicting." Severin's gaze remained on the creature. Experiencing the approach of them, Kieran's humor faded. That sounded exhausting. He walked closer to the barrier. Latch's eyes tracked him, but it did not retreat. Kieran stopped several meters away. "Sorry, buddy." Amvek frowned. The animal does not understand galactic standard. Wasn't really for him? The provost looked at the human for several seconds. "Tomorrow's certification will proceed." "Good. You will observe from the remote control gallery." "Also good." Severin nodded. "Latch will perform inspection without you physically present." Kieran smiled. "Best idea you've had all day." Amvek ignored that. "After the practical examination, we will determine whether your methods have any place in the academy." Kieran looked down into the training chamber. Fair enough. He spotted a ceiling service panel near the western wall. One corner sat a few millimeters lower than the others. His mind immediately pictured the panel dropping, then the adjacent one, then a maintenance cable catching, then somebody beneath it looking up instead of moving. Behind the glass, Latch's veins tightened. Kieran sighed. "Yeah," he told the creature softly. "I know." The next morning, Crisis Hall 7 behaved perfectly. That should have made Kieran feel better. It did not. He sat in the remote control gallery with Provost Amvek while the candidates assembled below. Severin walked Latch through the main entrance. The skeleton hesitated once. Kieran was 2 decks away. Then it continued. Every candidate received the standard mental integrity sweep. No suspicious memory patterns, no prohibited assistance, no hidden scenario knowledge. When Latch finished, the creature left with Severin. The candidates prepared for the simulation. Kieran leaned closer to the monitor. "What is today's scenario?" Amvek looked at him. "You are the external evaluator." "Exactly. You should know." "I know the category. I want to know what they know." The provost tapped a control. A summary appeared. Transit terminal pressure incident. Localized smoke. 2 injured civilians. 1 blocked route. Unstable power. Kieran frowned. Too tidy. It is an examination, not an ambush. Emergencies are ambushes. We are assessing procedures. Prospectors survive contact with reality approximately as long as pastries survive staff meetings. Amvek stared. Kieran waved at the screen. "Started?" The lights inside Crisis Hall 7 shifted to amber. Artificial smoke poured from vents. A section of mock ceiling lowered with controlled hydraulic noise. Rescue mannequins activated distress signals. Candidates moved. Kieran watched without speaking. For the first minute they were excellent. They established command. Separated teams checked atmosphere. Marked the unsafe route. 2 candidates reached the first casualty. Another pair rerouted simulated civilians. Kieran made notes. Then the North team reported its evacuation corridor blocked. Expected. They chose the secondary route. Expected. A candidate at the command station reassigned personnel. Good. The simulated power grid flickered. Expected. Emergency lighting activated. Expected. Kieran relaxed by perhaps 2%. Then one of the cameras shook. He looked at the feed. What was that? Amvek checked the scenario timeline. Structural effect. Scheduled. Not at this stage. The provost tapped the console. The camera stabilized. Below, the candidates continued. Kieran watched a pressure indicator on the east wall. It dipped. Rose. Dipped again, he pointed. Is that simulated? Everything in the hall is isolated from station systems. That wasn't my question. Amvek checked. His posture changed. No. Kieran leaned forward. Paused the scenario. Amvek touched the control. Nothing happened. The simulation continued. Artificial smoke thickened in the western zone. A candidate called for visibility reduction. Kieran said, "Did they request that?" "No. Kill environmental effects." Amvek entered a command. Nothing. A status symbol changed from green to amber, then read control bus fault. Kieran was already standing. Open all exits. Amvek entered another command. The display flashed. Partial response. Kieran's mind opened like a map struck by lightning. Control bus fault. Could be local processor. Could be rotating ring connector. Could be power quality. If control signals were failing but mechanical systems remained active, some effects might continue under cached scenario commands. If door systems received incomplete state instructions, which exits are fail open, all emergency exits. Mechanically, Amvik paused. Yes, that pause was enough. Kieran looked at him. Which ones aren't? The main pressure partition requires synchronization because the outer service corridor is on a separate atmospheric segment. Great. Below them, candidates had begun noticing that the scenario was behaving incorrectly. One called control. Amvik answered. Certification team, hold positions. We are experiencing a technical fault. Kieran grabbed a second microphone. No, Amvik glared. Kieran keyed the channel. Certification team, continue emergency posture. Technical fault is now part of the problem, whether anyone planned it or not. 27 candidates looked toward the ceiling speakers. The tall candidate from yesterday answered, Eveliator Moss. Unfortunately, a few heads moved. Good humor meant they were still thinking. Confirm atmosphere readings locally. Do not trust scenario overlays. Report anything physical that doesn't match the briefing. Responses began immediately. East pressure stable. Western smoke increasing. North shutter cycling. Central lighting intermittent. Mock casualty beacon 3 has lost synchronization. A candidate shouted from the west side. Ceiling restraint released. Kieran's stomach tightened. On the feed, one of the lightweight simulated debris panels had dropped farther than designed. Nobody was beneath it. Yet, his brain generated the next branch, adjacent restraint. Common controller? Mechanical release line? Clear the western ceiling zone. The team leader below answered. It's outside assigned hazard. It isn't anymore. They moved. Provost Amvik opened a station emergency channel. Operations, isolate Hall 7 simulation network. Static, then a reply. Isolation command received. Rotating ring interface not confirming. Kieran turned rotating interface. The hall rotates during certain scenarios. Is it rotating now? No. The floor shifted. Barely. A cup on the console slid half a centimeter. Kieran watched it. Amvik watched it. Neither spoke for 1 second. Then Kieran said, now it is. The rotation indicator remained at 0. That was worse. If movement wasn't being reported, his thoughts split. Brake failure, motor command, sensor loss, uneven rotational impulse, loose equipment.
Personnel balance. Atmospheric doors. Gravity orientation remained station standard because the ring's rotation was for simulation, not artificial gravity. Good, so the movement itself was more mechanical than physiological. Still dangerous.
Get Severin away from the hall. Amvek looked at him. What? Latch. The Skelleth is in the integrity suite. Good. Keep him there. Amvek's eyes narrowed. Why are you thinking about the animal now? Because if everyone starts panicking, a telepathic predator is the last thing I want walking into it. That apparently made sense even to the provost. Below, the candidates had shifted from examination behavior to real response. Kieran watched their movements. The North team avoided the cycling shutter. Good. The medical pair moved mannequins away from the unstable ceiling. Also good. Then the Western smoke emitters increased output. Not toxic. But visibility dropped rapidly. Amvek said, those units should shut automatically under network fault. They didn't. Clearly. Can candidates disable them locally? Yes. Do they know how? It is not part of candidate training. Kieran stared at him. Amvek stared back. Right? Kieran said. Today it is. He keyed the microphone. West team, find the smoke emitter housing. Manual cutoff should be external. A candidate answered, coughing despite the harmless vapor. Found it. Locked tool. Certification tools aren't rated for maintenance access. Kieran closed his eyes for half a second. Not because he was thinking. Because he was thinking too much. Housing locked. Could send station maintenance. Too slow. Smoke non-toxic, so maybe not priority. But visibility loss combined with unreported floor movement and debris hazards increased collision risk. Leave emitter running. Reroute. Don't fight the housing. Abandon the west lane. The candidate said that leaves one approved evacuation path. Approved isn't the same as available. What else do you have? Silence. Kieran could almost hear 27 students searching memory for a procedure. He leaned toward the microphone. Stop looking for the answer they taught you. Look at the room. The tall candidate turned slowly. Her gaze landed on a maintenance gate. Service corridor. Another candidate said, not certified for evacuation. Kieran answered, is it physically unsafe? No. Then decide. The team leader looked at her people. Service corridor. They moved. Provost Amvek stared at Kieran. That violates examination procedure. Kieran pointed at the red control console. We are experiencing a slight shortage of examination. The cascade did not become catastrophic. That was the dangerous thing about real emergencies. Most did not announce themselves with a single giant failure. They accumulated. A shutter stopped halfway. A sensor reported an impossible pressure value. One candidate slipped when the hall shifted again. No serious injury. 2 communication repeaters dropped out. A ceiling panel released but remained hanging from its safety tether. The main control system kept trying to execute fragments of the original simulation. Fake hazards and real faults overlapped until the candidates could no longer assume which was which. Kieran stopped trying to solve the whole hall. Instead, he asked one question repeatedly. What can hurt somebody in the next minute? Not theoretically, not eventually. Next minute. Unstable panel. Move people. Cycling shutter. Block route. Smoke. Reroute. Loose equipment under motion. Secure or abandon. Bad sensor. Verify locally. Conflicting command. Choose one leader. Every solved immediate problem changed the branches. Some disappeared. Others opened. Provost Amvek watched him fill a slate with arrows, crossed out options and boxes. You predicted this. Kieran looked up sharply. No. You imagined rotation failure yesterday. I imagined 12 things yesterday. One is happening. That doesn't make me psychic. It makes reality rude. He pointed at the slate. Most of these are wrong. Amvek stared at the mess. Kieran crossed out 3 more branches. That's the useful part. What? Being wrong early? The provost looked down through the observation window. The candidates had established a clean line through the service corridor. Your species deliberately creates incorrect futures. We call it planning. That is not planning. On Earth it is. A warning tone sounded. A new fault appeared. Outer service brochure partition. Unconfirmed state. Kieran went still. The candidate's improvised route passed directly toward that partition. Amvek swore. Kieran keyed the microphone. Stop the service evacuation. The team halted. The leader answered. Why partition state unknown? We have green locally. Verify both sides. A candidate reached the panel. Inner pressure normal. Outer? No remote reading. Branch. If sensor failure only, route safe. If outer corridor pressure low, opening dangerous. If partition seal damaged, risk. If control bus false status, do not open it. The leader looked back toward the smoke-filled hall, then we're boxed. No, you're paused. Difference about 30 seconds if we use them well. Kieran scanned feeds. Main north route blocked by cycling shutter. West route obscured but physically intact beyond smoke. Central lane crossed unstable debris zone. Service partition uncertain. 4 bad options, not 0. He pointed at the north shutter. Can we cut power locally? Amvek said. Emergency disconnect is on the hall side, candidates? They can access it. Kieran keyed the channel. North team. Kill shutter power. That leaves it halfway closed. Exactly. The candidate hesitated, then understood. A moving hazard became a static obstacle. They hit the disconnect. The shutter stopped. Gap beneath, low but wide enough for several species. Not all. Kieran asked, who can't fit? 3 candidates identified themselves. Everyone else through north. 3 remain with command group. Amvek said, you are splitting the class. Yes. Standard evacuation doctrine assumes standard doors. Amvek stopped arguing. That was new. Kieran noticed but had no time to enjoy it. The remaining candidates needed another route: central debris zone. 1 tethered panel, 2 unstable fixtures. Could they secure? Possibly. West smoke route? Visibility poor, but breathable. Which was safer? His mind produced both. He discarded the central route. Too many overhead variables. Remaining team west corridor. Hands on wall. Maintain physical contact. Move slow. The leader answered, visibility under 1 meter. Then 1 meter is what you've got. They moved. A minute later, every candidate was out of the rotating hall. Kieran exhaled. Then Amvek said, instructor station. What? The floor coordinator. Kieran looked at the feeds. An alien instructor remained inside. Pinned? No. The coordinator stood behind a jammed transparent partition near the central console. Kieran had forgotten him. That hit harder than every alarm. His brain had prioritized the moving candidates and dropped 1 fixed person from the map. He swore. Amvik said, partition controls are dead. Kieran was already heading for the door. Where are you going? Hall. You cannot enter. I can. You are the external evaluator. Today I'm versatile. Amvik followed. Crisis Hall 7 smelled like machine oil and artificial smoke. The floor was still moving in tiny, irregular shifts. Kieran entered through the north access point with 2 academy technicians. He did not run. Running inside a faulty rotating training hall was exactly the kind of decision his brain generated so it could reject it. The rescued candidates watched from behind the safety barrier. The trapped floor coordinator raised 1 hand through the transparent partition. I'm fine, Kieran approached. Excellent. Continue doing that. The coordinator looked offended. Good. Offended was stable. 1 technician opened a maintenance panel. Actuator command is locked. Mechanical release. Opposite side. Kieran looked through the partition. Of course it was. The floor shifted. Above them something clicked. His attention snapped upward. The tethered ceiling panel, still holding, probably. His mind produced the panel falling. Technician injured, partition blocked. Second panel following. He stepped sideways. Move the tool case. The technician frowned. Why? Humor me? They moved it. 3 seconds later, a loose strip of decorative paneling dropped into the exact space where the case had been. Nobody spoke. Kieran stared at it, then at the technician. That one was luck. The technician stared back. Human luck is disturbing. You should see our weather. They returned to the partition. The trapped coordinator pointed down. Lower maintenance channel. Kieran crouched. A narrow conduit ran beneath the transparent wall. Too small for a person, large enough for an arm. Mechanical release on the far side, low to the floor. He lay flat. The technicians protested simultaneously. Stop. It's fine. You do not know that. Kieran smiled without looking up. Welcome to the entire problem. He slid 1 arm through the conduit. His shoulder barely fit. The release mechanism sat beyond his fingertips. He needed something longer. Tool. A technician handed him a narrow insulated rod. He reached too short. Another branch. Tape 2 tools. Bad leverage. Use cable loop. Better. He withdrew. Give me the inspection fiber. The technician handed him a flexible probe. Kieran looped its cable around the release lever. Pulled. Nothing. Wrong angle. He shifted. The floor moved again. His shoulder pressed against the conduit edge. He stopped. Waited. Movement ended. Pull. The lever shifted slightly. Again. The partition unlocked with a heavy metallic knock. The coordinator pushed. The door opened. No applause. Kieran preferred it that way. Out. They moved. A station alarm changed tone. Provost Amvek's voice came through the local speaker. Rotation motor has been isolated. Hall movement should cease. Kieran glanced at the floor. It stopped. Should. Amvek said. I chose that word deliberately. You're learning. Latch was waiting outside the safety perimeter. Kieran almost turned around. Sivran stood beside the skilleth. The creature's veins were flat, not with panic, with concentration. The candidates filled the wide corridor behind them. Medical staff checked the 1 student who had fallen. Technicians moved equipment. Instructors argued quietly over shutdown procedures. Kieran walked out of the hall. Latch stared at him, then backed up 1 step. Kieran stopped. Fair. Sivran looked exhausted. It felt you. From here? Not clearly. Enough. Kieran glanced through the corridor windows. During the fault? Yes. And Sivran struggled for the words. It was different. Different how? When you first arrived, Latch sensed catastrophe around you without external cause that produced avoidance. Kieran waited. During the actual emergency, everyone else became cognitively louder. Fear, uncertainty, competing intentions. Severin touched the guidance sash loosely. You became quieter. Kieran frowned. I did not feel quiet, not empty, narrow. The handler looked at him with something close to wonder. Before danger, your mind expands into many possible failures. During danger, it removes them. Kieran looked at Latch. That made uncomfortable sense. Planning was wide, action was narrow. Before a problem, he considered everything. During one, most possibilities stopped mattering. What could hurt someone next? What action changed that? Then the next. Severin continued. Latch approached the Integrity Suite door while the hall was failing. Why? I believe your mind finally made sense to him. Kieran laughed once. That's unfortunate. It barely makes sense to me. Provost Amvik arrived. For once, he did not look annoyed. He looked tired. Kieran trusted tired administrators more. They had fewer spare resources for ceremony. All candidates are accounted for, Amvik said. Good. One minor injury. Good. Hall 7 is offline. Very good. Amvik's throat plates shifted. The examination is void. From behind him came a collective groan. Kieran turned toward the candidates. He's right. The tall candidate stared at him. We completed an unscripted emergency. You also received direct external guidance? From the evaluator? Exactly. We demonstrated adaptation. Absolutely. Then why void it? Kieran glanced at Amvik. The provost was clearly delighted to let him answer this one. Because certification means the next person who trusts your badge shouldn't have to wonder whether you passed, because Kieran Moss happened to be in the ceiling. Several candidates looked up. Kieran pointed. Not literally. Mostly? A few laughed. The tall candidate folded her arms, so we repeat the exam. Yes, with you evaluating. If they'll have me. Provost Amvik said. That remains under discussion. Kieran nodded. See? Optimism. The inquiry lasted the rest of the day. Asterreach found the mechanical cause before dinner. Kieran did not. That mattered. A rotating ring interface had suffered a timing fault during the simulation. The central controller interpreted delayed acknowledgments as incomplete commands and repeatedly attempted to reconcile old simulation states with real hardware positions. The problem was technical, specific, and fixable. Kieran had not mysteriously understood alien machinery better than alien engineers. He had not predicted the failure. He had not discovered some human-only secret hidden in their systems. He had simply reacted to uncertainty in a way the Academy had not expected. That distinction became the center of the inquiry. Provost Amvik stood before the faculty board with a projection of Kieran's handwritten slate. It was an ugly thing. Arrows, crossed-out roots, question marks, boxes around hazards. Most branches ended nowhere. Several contradicted each other. One read, IF partition gene is wrong. Don't care why yet. Set a file. Amvik pointed at it. Evaluator Moss generated 19 response branches during the incident. A faculty member asked, how many were correct? That is the wrong question, Amvik said. Kieran, seated against the back wall, looked up. Now that was interesting. Amvik continued. Most never occurred. Several were impossible. Some were mutually exclusive. Another faculty member frowned. Then they were errors. No. Amvik looked through the transparent chamber wall toward Severin and Latch waiting in the corridor. They were disposable. Silence. Kieran stopped smiling. Human emergency cognition, at least as demonstrated by Evaluator Moss, can generate high-detail possible failures, specifically so they may be rejected before commitment. A faculty member said, inefficient. Kieran muttered. The provost had understood. Our doctrine treats vivid prospective cognition as commitment. If an individual strongly imagines an action, we assume the action has significance. Amvik changed the projection. A simplified diagram appeared. Wait until you hear about meetings? Amvik ignored him. Perhaps. Yet under uncertain conditions, it gave him a useful property. What property? Kieran expected the provost to say adaptability, or preparation, or resilience. Instead, Amvik answered. He did not need his first idea to be right. The room went quiet. That landed. Kieran had spent much of his career teaching exactly that without saying it clearly. People froze because they wanted certainty before movement. or they clung to the first explanation because changing their minds felt like failure. Emergency work punished both. The first interpretation was a tool, not an identity. A faculty member looked at Kieran. Is this typical human cognition? Kieran stood. No idea. The board reacted with visible disappointment. He shrugged. You invited one human. You cannot generalize. I can. It would just be irresponsible. Amvek almost smiled. How many humans think like you? A lot of emergency people. Engineers. Pilots. Parents. Anyone who's ever organized a school trip. School trip. Never mind. Severin entered the chamber. Latch remained outside. The handler held a small monitor. Provost Amvek turned. Severin displayed the readings. Latch's stress response to Evaluator Moss has decreased. Kieran blinked. I haven't done anything. That may be why. Severin looked at the board. We repeated passive exposure while Evaluator Moss spoke. Latch now appears able to separate his baseline perspective imagery from emotional intention. He's learning me. Yes. Kieran glanced toward the corridor. Latch sat beyond the doorway. 6 eyes watched him. Poor animal. Severin made the strange sound that meant he was definitely laughing this time. Aster Reach did not rewrite its entire educational system. Kieran appreciated that. Institutions that changed everything after one unusual day usually changed the wrong things. The faculty did 3 smaller things. First, they added a rule that Skeleth distress automatically paused cognitive integrity inspection. No handler would be required to force an animal through a refusal response merely to keep an examination on schedule. Second, human candidates and evaluators would not automatically be classified as suspicious when their mental patterns fell outside Skeleth baselines. They would be assessed using multiple methods. Third, Aster Reach added 1 new question to emergency certification. Not a procedure. A question. What assumption are you making that you have not verified? Kieran liked that one. The candidates did not, which meant it was probably useful. Their replacement practical examination was scheduled 2 days later. Kieran arrived early. Crisis Hall 7 remained closed, so the Academy moved the exam to Hall 4. The space was smaller. The exits were better marked. Kieran immediately noticed a supply cabinet positioned where an evacuation line might clip its open door. He moved it. Provost Amvek watched him. You have been here for 11 seconds. It was bothering me. The cabinet has occupied that position for 6 years. Very patient cabinet candidates began entering. Severin appeared at the far end of the corridor with Latch. Kieran stepped aside automatically. Want me to use the side entrance? Severin shook his head. No. Kieran looked at the Skeleth. Latch stopped, the same distance as before. The corridor quieted. Several candidates noticed. Provost Amvek did not move. Neither did Severin. Nobody tugged the guidance sash. Nobody ordered the animal forward. Kieran waited. His brain did what it always did. Crowded doorway. What if someone fell? Supply cart behind the second group. Could block retreat. Hall lights flicker. Emergency strips on lower wall. New room. Unknown ceiling release layout. Different pressure partition. Candidate near the back favoring left leg. Possible old injury. If alarm, Latch's veins tightened. Kieran whispered, sorry. The creature took 1 step forward, then another. Kieran stayed where he was. Latch reached the doorway, stopped, looked directly at him. Kieran had the absurd feeling of being judged by a very anxious black-armored professor. Morning? The Skeleth's filaments lifted. Behind Kieran, somebody shifted. Latch did not retreat. It crossed the threshold. The candidates remained silent. Severin released a slow breath. Kieran smiled. Then Latch walked straight past the first row of candidates and stopped beside him. That seems unnecessary. The creature sat. Provost Amvek said, it appears he has decided your catastrophes are non-binding. Kieran looked down at the Skeleth. Story of my life. Severin began the integrity sweep. Latch rose and moved among the candidates. It checked one, then another. Each time it passed Kieran, its sensory veins twitched at whatever unlikely disaster his mind had just produced. A jammed exit, a failed light, a confused responder, a blocked corridor. Things that might happen, things that probably would not, things worth considering anyway. Latch glanced at him once more, then kept walking.